Stranded on a deserted island, Daniel's hope fades until he finds a dying German shepherd. Against all odds, their bond sparks a fight for survival, uncovering secrets that change everything. What happened next shocked everyone and proved that loyalty can save even the darkest days. Before you scroll away, people watch my videos every day, they enjoy them, but it's like the subscribe button is their enemy. Come on, hit that subscribe button. It's free, and you'll get a heartfelt blessing. The ocean was a monster that day. Waves rose like dark towers, crashing against the hull of the small sailboat with a fury that felt personal. Daniel gripped the wheel with white knuckles, salt spray stinging his eyes, the radio already dead. A storm like this wasn't supposed to form. Not here, not now. It came out of nowhere, tearing through the sea like it had been waiting for him. The last thing he remembered was the sound of wood snapping like bones, and the icy slap of the ocean swallowing him whole. When he came to, it was the stillness that startled him. No waves, no wind, just the quiet hush of the sea and a sky the color of bruises. He was on his back, coughing up salt water, face buried in coarse sand. Around him, jagged rocks and dense jungle marked the edges of a small, secluded island. No footprints, no voices, nothing. He was alone. Daniel, a 38-year-old marine engineer from Oregon, had been sailing to decompress from a world that had become too heavy. Years of stress, the loss of his father, and the silence that came after a broken engagement. This trip was meant to be a reset. Now it looked like it might be his grave. He staggered to his feet, muscles aching, his clothes soaked and torn. In the distance, pieces of his sailboat bobbed near the reef like broken dreams. He called out, a reflex, foolish in its hope, but the only answer was the cry of seabirds. He explored the island slowly, mapping its contours in his mind. It wasn't large, maybe a mile wide, and thick with palms, vines, and eerie silence. There were coconut trees and what looked like small fruit bushes deeper inland. He'd survive. For now. But on the second day, just as the heat began to shimmer off the sand, and Daniel considered returning to his makeshift shelter, he heard it. A whimper. Faint. Broken. Desperate. He froze, scanning the tree line. Another whimper. Closer now. He pushed through the thick brush, branches slashing his arms, heart pounding with something he hadn't felt since the wreck. Purpose. There, tangled in the roots of a fallen tree, lay a German shepherd. The sight hit him like a punch. The dog was barely more than skin and bone. Its fur, once a proud sable, was matted and caked in dirt. One leg twisted at an unnatural angle. Flies hovered around its open wounds, and yet its eyes were alive, weak but alert, watching him. Hey, buddy," Daniel whispered, crouching low, hands out. "What in God's name happened to you?" The dog growled, a low, pitiful sound, not of threat but pain. Daniel didn't move closer. He knew better. Instead, he backed away slowly and returned with a broken coconut and the last of the dried fish he had found near the rocks. He placed them near the edge of the tree roots, far enough to be non-threatening. Then he waited. For hours. At first, the shepherd didn't move, eyes flickering between Daniel and the offering. Then, inch by painful inch, it dragged its broken body forward. The coconut water vanished in seconds. The fish followed. It collapsed shortly after, muzzle resting on the earth like it had finally let go of something it had been clinging to. Daniel swallowed the lump in his throat. "You're not dying here," he murmured. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he gathered leaves for bedding, cleaned the dog's wounds with seawater and strips of his shirt, and kept watch as the shepherd shivered under the moonlight. In the morning, he named him Ghost, because he had appeared like one, pale, fragile, but hauntingly there. Over the next few days, Daniel's focus shifted. Survival was still important, but Ghost gave him something more urgent. The shepherd's leg was bad, likely broken, but the bleeding had slowed. He still couldn't walk, but he'd begun to eat and drink a little more each day. Daniel spoke to him constantly about his father, who used to take him camping in the woods and taught him how to splint a broken bone using branches and shoelaces, about his ex, who never liked dogs, about the way the stars looked brighter out here. Ghost would just blink slowly, his ears flicking at the sound of Daniel's voice. Each day, Daniel carried him closer to the shore in a sling made from vines and bamboo, letting him feel the breeze and sun. And each night, he tucked Ghost into the shelter first, before curling beside him, body curved protectively like a shield. But even as Ghost's body began to heal, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling. Why was a German shepherd here, on this deserted island? No collar, no tags, no human tracks, no sign of wreckage, no signs of life. It didn't make sense. And on the 7th day, as Daniel was collecting coconuts near the edge of the north cliff, he found it, half buried beneath the sand and salt. A rusted metal container, clearly old, its lid bent open by time or force. Inside were bones and a human shoe. Daniel stumbled back, breath caught in his throat. Ghost had crawled here, from something or someone. And the island wasn't as empty as he'd thought. Daniel couldn't breathe. The rusted container stared back at him like a wound torn open by time. It was partially hidden beneath a layer of leaves and sand, but the truth was undeniable. Those were human bones, fragile, yellowed, a femur, ribs, and a child's sneaker, faded pink with a cartoon flower on the side. He staggered back, heart hammering. Ghost, now able to limp in short bursts, had followed him and stood behind, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. When Ghost saw the box, his body tensed. He growled, not at Daniel, but at the earth itself, like it held memories too painful to bury. Daniel dropped to his knees, brushing away more sand. There was no identification, no name, just a necklace. Small, silver, tarnished. He picked it up, brushing away grime. It was a pendant shaped like a paw print. His chest tightened. Whoever this was, they had loved a dog. Maybe even Ghost. "Is this where you came from?" he whispered, looking at the shepherd. "Did you belong to them?" Ghost didn't move, just stared at the box, tail limp, eyes unreadable. There was something deep in that stare, an old sorrow, a weight that only the truly abandoned know. Daniel spent the rest of the day digging a proper grave. He couldn't leave the bones like that, scattered, forgotten. He lined the hole with stones, gently laid the remains inside, and marked it with a wooden cross made from driftwood. Ghost sat beside him the entire time, not eating, not drinking, just watching. When the last scoop of sand was packed, Daniel knelt by the grave and said nothing. There were no words that could undo what had happened here. No comfort for the dead. But maybe, just maybe, there was something that could be done for the living. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He kept hearing noises in the trees. Footsteps, rustling that didn't match the usual rhythm of island wind or animal movement. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. But it was there. He sat by the fire with a sharpened stick in one hand and a stone in the other, his back against Ghost's flank. The shepherd growled softly once, eyes locked toward the forest. But nothing emerged. Morning brought no answers, only more questions. Daniel decided to explore the north end of the island, the only part he hadn't thoroughly searched. He didn't want to leave Ghost alone, but the dog insisted on coming, limping along beside him with stubborn loyalty. The jungle grew denser as they walked, birds scattered from the branches above. At one point, they passed an old, overgrown footpath, clearly man-made, now hidden by years of disuse. And then they found it, a clearing, and within it, remnants of a cabin, rotten wood, a fallen tin roof, pieces of glass that may have once been windows. Daniel stepped carefully inside, heart pounding. This place had history. On one wall, blackened by mildew, he saw faded writing carved into the wood. June 8th, no rescue. Food running out. Staying for her. Another, deeper below it. Still no signal. But she won't leave the dog. We stay. Daniel stared. There was more, a shelf filled with rotted cans, a small tattered notebook, and in one corner, a child's drawing. Faded, but intact. It was a picture of a German shepherd beside a little girl with blonde hair, holding hands beneath a smiling sun. The name written in crayon beneath it. Me and Shadow. Daniel's voice cracked as he whispered, Shadow. Ghost, no, Shadow, limped over to the drawing and nudged it gently with his nose. Then he looked at Daniel. It all made sense. Shadow wasn't just a stray. He had belonged to someone. To her. The girl buried on the beach. They had crashed here too, maybe years ago. The parents must have died first. And the girl. She had stayed, waited, survived as long as she could. With Shadow. Daniel sank to the floor, overwhelmed. This dog had watched his world disappear. Stayed loyal, survived, protected her memory, and somehow endured long enough to find Daniel. But why? What had kept him alive? He flipped through the notebook. Pages were mostly ruined, but one stuck out, near the back, written in shakier handwriting. If anyone finds this, please take care of Shadow. He's a good boy. He stayed with me when no one else could. Please, don't let him die here alone. Daniel's vision blurred. I won't, he whispered. I promise. That night, he and Shadow slept inside the broken cabin. For the first time, the dog curled close to Daniel willingly, resting his head on his chest. Daniel felt the beat of the shepherd's heart, stronger than it had been the day they met, slower, calmer. The island had taken many things, but it had given him something too, a second chance. Days passed. Together, they rebuilt. The cabin became a shelter. Daniel used scrap metal from the shipwreck for tools, constructed traps for fish, learned which fruits were safe. Shadow regained some strength. His leg still limped, but he moved faster now, alert, protective. They became a team, like they had always been meant to be. But one morning, a low rumble broke the silence. Not thunder, not wind, engines. Daniel raced to the beach, Shadow right behind him. On the horizon, a helicopter. He waved his arms, screamed, built a fire, threw palm fronds into it to make smoke. The chopper slowed, turned, headed toward them. Shadow barked wildly, tail wagging for the first time since Daniel had known him. As the chopper hovered overhead, Daniel turned to the dog beside him. We're going home, boy. But something flickered in Shadow's eyes. Hesitation. Fear. As if home was no longer a place he remembered. Or maybe it was already here. The blades of the helicopter whipped the trees into a frenzy as it descended, kicking up a storm of dust and leaves. Daniel shielded his eyes, hand raised, heart pounding in disbelief. After months, maybe even a year on that island, someone had finally found him. Two figures emerged from the aircraft, rescue personnel in bright orange suits. One had a medical pack slung over his shoulder, the other a radio. "Are you Daniel Reyes?" the taller one called out over the roar. Daniel nodded, dazed. Yes, oh my God, I'm him." The man turned to his partner and gave a thumbs up. The second rescuer radioed back to the chopper. while the first rushed forward and gripped Daniel's arm firmly. "We've been searching since your last signal. Your emergency beacon." "I didn't send one," Daniel interrupted, confused. "It stopped working after the storm, months ago." The rescuer blinked. "Then, we don't know who sent the signal. We got coordinates just 2 days ago. They led us here." Daniel turned, stunned, toward Shadow. The dog was sitting a few feet away, still as stone, watching everything. His ears twitched at the noise, but he made no move to run. No panic, just alertness and something else. Resolve. It hit Daniel like a wave. The grave, the drawing, the notebook. The dog had stayed behind on purpose. He had waited, not for rescue, but for someone worthy of being rescued with him. Daniel choked up as the realization struck. This dog hadn't just survived. He had endured for someone else. And once he found that person, then, and only then, had he allowed rescue to find him. The second rescuer approached, kneeling beside Shadow with a cautious hand. "You got a dog with you, huh?" Daniel nodded slowly. "He's not a dog. His name's Shadow." The rescuer gently scratched behind Shadow's ears. Shadow didn't flinch. Instead, he closed his eyes for a moment. Then, after a pause, he licked the man's hand. "He's ready," Daniel said, almost to himself. The journey back to civilization was a blur. First, a medevac to a ship stationed offshore. Then a transfer to the mainland. Daniel remembered the hospital lights, the bright sting of antiseptic, the rush of nurses checking vitals, asking questions. But all he could focus on was the German shepherd lying beside his cot, hooked up to an IV, his head resting on Daniel's boots like he was still guarding the island. When the doctors told Daniel the dog had survived injuries that should have killed him long ago, malnutrition, infected wounds, dehydration, he just nodded. He knew. This wasn't just a dog. This was a warrior. Reporters swarmed the moment Daniel was cleared to go home. They wanted the survival story. The man and dog against the wild headlines. They asked about the crash, about what he ate, how he survived. But Daniel never let them turn Shadow into a prop. He told the real story. About the girl, about the grave, about the dog who never left her side until the day he found someone who needed him just as much. Soon, offers came flooding in. TV interviews, book deals, even a documentary proposal. Daniel declined most of them. But there was one invitation he couldn't ignore. A letter from a woman named Dr. Evelyn Morse, a veterinary trauma therapist who worked with war dogs suffering from PTSD. "I've read your story," it said. "Shadow's past matters, but so does his future. If you're open to it, I'd like to meet you both. I think I can help him heal, and I think he can help others." Daniel folded the letter and looked at Shadow, who now had some weight back on his frame and had begun walking without a limp. His eyes were still haunted, but there was softness now. Trust. "Want to help others like you helped me?" Daniel asked him. Shadow thumped his tail twice. Dr. Morse's clinic was nestled in a quiet town outside Denver. Not the kind of place you'd expect for military dogs and trauma cases. But that was the point. The dogs needed peace. She met the gate herself. Mid-40s, gentle voice, steady eyes. "He's older than he looks," she said, crouching beside Shadow. "But his heart, that's still young." Shadow sniffed her hand, then pressed his head into it. "He's seen a lot," Daniel said. "Too much. Then we teach him to carry it differently," Dr. Morse replied. "Not forget, just not alone." The transition wasn't easy. Shadow had nightmares. He paced when the wind howled too hard, barked if someone closed a door too fast, but he never lashed out, never growled in fear. He just endured, like he always had, and little by little, he got better. Dr. Morse introduced him to other dogs, some blind, some missing limbs, all carrying invisible wounds. Shadow became a silent anchor among them. Dogs that wouldn't eat alone started eating when Shadow was near. Puppies too scared to come out of their crates followed his lead. He had become a teacher, a guardian, a healer. And Daniel? He stayed by his side through it all. He helped fix up the clinic's outdoor kennel space, repaired broken fencing, walked the dogs who didn't trust men yet. For the first time in his life, he felt like he belonged. 6 months passed. Then one night, something changed. Shadow started pawing at Daniel's bedroom door before dawn. Daniel opened it, confused. The dog led him outside, into the field behind the clinic. He stopped beneath a tree, sat down, and looked up at the sky. There was nothing there, just stars. But Daniel understood. The last time Shadow had done something like this was on the island, when the helicopter came. He sat beside him, watched the stars, and waited. "I know, buddy," he whispered. "You're thinking about her again." Shadow rested his head on Daniel's leg. "She'd be proud of you," Daniel said, voice cracking. "You kept her alive, you know. In here." He placed a hand over Shadow's chest. "Now you're keeping me alive, too." They stayed like that for hours, just a man and a dog sitting beneath the sky. Two souls once broken, now whole together. Time moved forward like a gentle tide, never rushed, never loud, just steady. By winter, the snow blanketed the Colorado fields behind Dr. Morse's clinic, and Shadow had grown a soft gray along his muzzle. His body bore the scars of years lived in survival, but his gait was confident now. He no longer flinched at thunder. He no longer growled in his sleep. And Daniel? He was different too. There was a new light in his eyes. Not the wild-eyed desperation of the castaway who had once clawed his way through jungle to bury a girl he never knew, but a calm, rooted strength. A man who had learned to live not despite loss, but because of what love had taught him. Every morning started the same: coffee, walks with Shadow, feeding the other dogs, checking fences. But every so often, something unexpected would slip into their routine. Like the letter. Daniel found it in the clinic mailbox one quiet Tuesday. Handwritten, no return address. He opened it slowly, expecting a bill or maybe another media request. But it wasn't either. It was from the girl's father, the girl from the island. Her name, Daniel learned, was Isabel. His hands trembled as he read. "I don't know how to thank you. I never imagined someone would find her, let alone treat her memory with such care. We lost our daughter in the storm while she was volunteering abroad. The report said the small transport she boarded disappeared over the ocean. The authorities gave up after 2 weeks. We didn't. Her mother lit a candle every night for a year. And then I read your story. I recognized the necklace in the photograph a reporter showed on the news. That was her drawing, too. She loved to sketch. Thank you for not letting her be forgotten. And thank you for giving her dog a second chance at life." He was her best friend. His name was Baxter. We raised him from a pup before she left. He went with her on that trip. We never thought he could have survived. Now I know he did. My wife passed last spring, but she always believed he was still out there, watching over Isabel. Maybe now she finally has peace. If it's not too much to ask. Could we see him? Even just once? Daniel read the letter 3 times before Shadow came over and nudged his hand. The German shepherd tilted his head at the scent of tears. "You're not just Shadow anymore," Daniel whispered. "You're Baxter. You were always Baxter." He folded the letter carefully. And then he made a call. A week later, Daniel stood on the front porch of a quiet suburban home, Baxter at his side. The dog was calm but alert, tail still, body leaning ever so slightly against Daniel's leg. The door opened. An older man stood there, thin, weathered, eyes red from tears he hadn't tried to hide. He didn't speak at first. He just looked down. And then he fell to his knees. "Baxter," he said in a choked whisper. The dog froze. His ears perked. He took one tentative step forward, then another. Daniel said nothing. He let the moment be. The man reached out a trembling hand. Baxter sniffed it. Then something incredible happened. The German shepherd leaned forward, slowly, and placed his head in the man's lap. The man broke. He cradled Baxter's head and wept, rocking back and forth, whispering over and over, "You found her. You stayed with her. Thank you." Daniel turned away, tears stinging his own eyes. He gave them time. An hour, maybe more. When he returned, the man was sitting on the porch swing, with Baxter resting at his feet, the sun painting them in a warm winter light. "He hasn't forgotten," the man said softly. "He still remembers us." "He remembers everything," Daniel replied. "That's what makes him who he is." The man nodded slowly, then looked at Daniel with something between sorrow and gratitude. "What happens now?" Daniel hesitated. "I think that's up to Baxter." They offered to take him back, to let him live out his final years in a quiet home filled with memories of his past. But Baxter wouldn't go inside. He wouldn't leave Daniel's side. Every time someone called him, he'd look up, but stay rooted beside the man who had buried Isabel, who had survived with him, who had called him by a new name when he'd almost given up on his old one. So they let him choose, and Baxter chose Daniel. Weeks passed, then months. Daniel visited often. He brought photographs of Isabel's drawings, stories about the island, and updates on Baxter's progress. Together they built a small memorial bench under an old oak tree in Isabel's honor. On the plaque, they etched, "She walked with courage. He waited with love." Baxter would sit beside the bench whenever they visited. He never barked. He never played. He just stayed. Still, watching the wind in the trees, as if he could see her there. Then one night, quiet, gentle, the sky full of stars, Baxter didn't come to bed. Daniel found him lying beside the bench in the early morning frost, eyes closed, body still. He had gone quietly, on his own terms, in the place he had chosen. Daniel sat beside him for hours, one hand resting on the dog's back, as the sun rose through the trees and cast golden light over the snow-dusted world. He didn't cry right away. He just whispered, "Thank you." Baxter's passing wasn't the end. It was, in a quiet, almost sacred way, a beginning. Daniel buried him beside the oak bench under the inscription they'd carved together, next to the place where Isabel's spirit seemed to linger in the rustling branches and dappled sunlight. He placed a small collar with a hand-etched nameplate that read both Shadow and Baxter, acknowledging the journey of both the dog and the man who had loved him. Word of Baxter's story spread again, this time not as a viral headline, but as something deeper, shared in classrooms, memorials, even therapy sessions. A dog who had survived unimaginable hardship, only to remain by a lost girl's side for weeks, then bond with the man who buried her. A story of loyalty, grief, and healing. Daniel received hundreds of letters, not from journalists, but from veterans, trauma survivors, and people who'd known loss. One, from a teenage boy who had lost his mother to cancer, read, "I couldn't cry until I read about Baxter. Then I cried for him. And for my mom. Thank you for showing me it's okay to love something that much." Daniel didn't seek attention. He never liked being in the spotlight. But he knew deep down that Baxter's story didn't belong to just him anymore. So he started something small. a foundation named the Shadow Project. Its mission? To support rescue efforts for dogs abandoned in disaster zones, war-torn areas, or remote parts of the world, places where survival seemed impossible. They offered veterinary care, trauma recovery training, and connections with veterans suffering from PTSD. The first dog they rescued was found in a ruined fishing village overseas, starving, injured, but alive. They named her Hope. And when she arrived in Colorado, Daniel was there to meet her. He didn't take her home. He didn't need to. She already had a match, a young soldier returning from deployment, whose doctor had quietly recommended a therapy companion. Daniel simply smiled and placed the leash in the soldier's hand. "She's tougher than she looks," he said, "but she'll teach you how to heal." Over the years, dozens more dogs came through, and with each one, Daniel could see the echo of Baxter in their eyes. Not the suffering, but the resilience. Daniel himself moved to a small cabin closer to the clinic. He still took morning walks, still drank black coffee, still paused beneath the old oak where Baxter lay. Sometimes Isabel's father joined him. They didn't talk much, just stood there in the silence. Two men forever bound by the same dog and the same loss, and the same peace that followed. One winter morning, a little girl, 7, maybe 8, approached Daniel as he was leaving the clinic. She had a sketchbook under her arm and a shy look in her eyes. "Are you the man who lived on the island?" she asked. Daniel smiled. "I guess I am." "Is it true your dog saved you?" He thought about that. Baxter hadn't pulled him from wreckage. He hadn't fought off predators or carried food. But in the moments when Daniel had been closest to giving up, when the jungle felt like a tomb and his soul couldn't carry another ounce of sorrow, Baxter had simply been there. Steady, watching, breathing. "I think," Daniel said slowly, "he saved more than just me." The girl beamed and opened her sketchbook. Inside was a pencil drawing, rough, childlike, but unmistakable. A German shepherd lying beside a cross made of driftwood, palm trees in the background, a man sitting nearby, staring at the sea. "I read about him," she said proudly. "His name was Baxter, but he was Shadow too." Daniel took the drawing gently, his heart full and heavy at the same time. "That's beautiful," he whispered. The girl tilted her head. "Are you sad?" He looked at her, into the innocent hope of her eyes, and smiled. "No," he said. "I'm grateful." As she skipped away, Daniel looked back at the sketch once more before tucking it in his coat. Then he turned toward the hills and walked home, each step quiet, strong, and filled with the memory of a dog who had once saved a man simply by surviving. And somewhere, just beyond the trees, the wind whispered through the branches, almost like a tail wagging in the sky.